Greetings everybody, welcome to your video series on an introduction to sociology. The topic for this video is U.S. social classes. Let's get started. In the olden days, there used to be something called economic status, and we basically looked at three classes. You were either in the upper class, the middle class, or the lower class. Over time, sociologists, economists have come to the conclusion that there are actually 6 specific U.S. social classes. And we generally no longer refer to them as economic classes, but socioeconomic classes, meaning there's a lot more that goes into figuring out where somebody falls than just how much money they make. So let's take a look at our 6 social classes, starting with the upper number 1 class, which is the elite 1%. We hear a lot about this 1%, right? It's the 1% versus the 99%. Who are the 1%? These are the very, very wealthiest people in our society. They tend to be found in jobs such as corporate CEOs. They run the media companies like Disney, Comcast, CBS. They can be university leaders, our elite universities like the Harvards and the Yales. And these folks generally make large political contributions. They have a lot of money and they pour that money into our political system as a way to try to get their needs met and to maintain their wealth and status. This also includes people who have inherited their wealth, people who have not necessarily worked hard themselves, but their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their great-grandparents created the wealth that is now passed down from one generation to the other, like the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the people who made huge amounts of money in the industrial age, and that money has been recycled down through generation after generation to where the current generation is massively wealthy without necessarily having done anything themselves to have earned that wealth. The second class is what we're going to call the upper middle class. These are college-educated folks. They tend to be found also in business. They're not necessarily the CEO of the company, but they're in upper management somehow. These are lawyers, these are doctors, these are people who have generally a lot of education. They are in these jobs that we have decided as a society are very important, and therefore we're willing to pay them a lot of money, give them a lot of power and prestige. The middle class is then broken down into the lower middle class. Our third social class, these are folks who also have some education. They may have an associate's degree, a certificate, maybe even a bachelor's degree. These are technical positions, computer support. They tend to be lower level management, admin support. There's certainly higher pay and more status than the working class, but they're not quite where the upper middle class ranks. Then our fourth social class is what we're going to refer to as the working class. These folks are working really hard, 40 hours a week, overtime perhaps. They are our custodial professionals. They are the cooks, landscapers, construction. They may make a lot of money, but most of them are doing okay, but not enough to put them into the middle class. Then our fifth social class is what we're going to call the working poor. These folks are also working, but this is unskilled labor. We talked in an earlier video about the field work. These tend to be very low paying. They're temporary jobs, seasonal, migrant type positions. These folks are working every week, every day, but they're not making enough to get ahead, and their jobs may change from season to season, or from place to place. And then the last class, the sixth social class, is what we call the underclass. These folks are not regularly employed, although they may occasionally be employed. They tend to be working in cash business. They get paid under the table. These are the day laborers, people who show up at a particular place and someone says, hey, we need you here for 8 hours, or we need you here this week for 40 hours. They're given a check, but there's no benefits that come with this kind of work. They're not making enough money to be able to save anything. They don't have health insurance. And there's they need government aid. They need assistance, whether it's housing, food, Medicaid, healthcare assistance, in order to survive. But they are working as well. And that's the underclass. Now, how do people move around the class system here in the United States? It is possible. The American dream is all about social mobility, doing better than our parents did. There are two terms we're going to look at here: intergenerational mobility and intragenerational mobility. Intergenerational mobility refers to a family that is doing better than it did in previous generations. So you're doing better than your grandparents did, or your parents are doing better than their parents did, or their grandparents did. That's intergenerational. You are moving up the ladder based on a previous generation. Intragenerational is when you are doing something within your own lifetime that is putting you ahead of your family. So maybe you are able to go to school, you get a graduate degree, you open your own business, you become a lawyer, you become a doctor. Your siblings may still be struggling for whatever reason, but you have done better in your lifetime from where you started. That's an intragenerational leap. If your family as a whole is doing better than a previous generation, then we call that intergenerational mobility. And historically, social mobility has always been possible in the United States. One generation has always done better than the previous generation. However, that has come into question over the last few decades. There is strong evidence to suggest that each generation is not necessarily going to do better than the previous generation. There may be some exceptions in that intragenerational mobility piece, but by and large, the intergenerational mobility has become harder and harder over the last few decades. And that's going to do it for now. Thanks for checking in. Never stop learning, and remember, sociology is everywhere.